So here we go, friends. Our topic this evening is called Two Onenesses, God and Religion. The Baha'i Faith proclaims three onenesses: the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of mankind. This talk will look at the first two onenesses, with particular attention to the second, the oneness of religion. To understand the unity of religion, we will need to consider the manifestations of God, their relationships with God, and their two stations. We will then examine the relationship between Buddhism and the Baha'i Faith to see if such an a-religious tradition can be brought under the umbrella of the oneness of religion. Wow, so there you go. As I said, this is going to be a very exciting, informative talk for us all. So to introduce our speaker, he is here, Mark Keedwell from Ottawa. Thank you for coming this evening. And I'll share a little bit of information here. After earning a master's degree in comparative religion from the University of Toronto, Mark Keedwell pursued a 35-year career in adult education, retiring from his position as a professor of curriculum and professional development at Algonquin College in Ottawa in 2020. One of the highlights of his career was the creation of a world religions course, which was among the first in North America to present the Baha'i Faith on an equal footing with 5 other major religions. Over the last 15 years, it has been well received by more than 3,000 students. Now, retirement has allowed him to direct his full attention to the study of comparative religions, resulting in the preparation and delivery of in-depth courses on Rúmí and the Baha'i Faith, Abdu'l-Bahá as interpreter, and the Arc of Ascent. His current course, Open Your Inner Eye, reflects upon a number of descriptions of the world, which is unveiled when the inner eye is opened, known as, I'll give this a try, Mark, the Imaginal Realm.
Yes.
I got that pronounced correctly.
Yep.
Great. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed speaker. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Maureen. This is great. I've watched 2 or 3 of the videos here, and I've always been super impressed with the quality of the speakers you're able to arrange. So I'm feeling kind of humble about your having chosen me. Anyway, so here we are. I just want to get right into it. Oh, I should say I've put 3 documents in the chat, which you are free to download for yourself at one point. The first one is the set of readings that I'm going to bring up on the screen. So if you want to have your own copy, you don't have to worry about typing anything in. As long as you can open a PDF file, you're good to go. So I'm actually going to share my screen. If I can find what I need, here it is. And I'm hoping you're able to see a set of readings here on the screen.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Now I'm going to ask for volunteers to help me read. There are 17 readings, so it may be that each of you would get a chance, or only a few, but more than once. So I'm going to leave that up to you. Ah, we already have Neely already. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's begin. So as you know, the Baha'i Faith is all about oneness or unity. This principle takes 3 different but intimately related forms: the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of mankind. So because our time tonight is limited, I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks about the first 2, the oneness of God and the oneness of religion. Most of the thoughts I'll share with you this evening concern the extraordinary individuals who act as go-betweens, linking God with humanity. The religions of the world have known these people by a variety of titles, such as prophets, messengers, Buddhas, and avatars. Judaism classed them as major and minor prophets, and also writing and non-writing prophets. For its part, the Quran discriminated between prophets and messengers. So in one of his conversations with Laura Clifford Barney, which was recorded in Some Answered Questions, Abdu'l-Bahá, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Bahá'í Faith, distinguishes between independent and dependent prophets. He says that independent prophets are each the author of a divine religion and the founder of a new dispensation. Having acquired the outpouring grace of the divine reality without an intermediary, they reveal a new book. Abdu'l-Bahá likens them to the physical sun, which is luminous in and of itself, and whose luminosity is an essential requirement rather than being acquired from another star. He places Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah in this category. Okay, Neely, it's your turn to read our first reading, please.
Sure. So the oneness of God, divine unity. The independent prophets are founders, that is, they establish a new religion, recreate the souls, regenerate the morals of society, and promulgate a new way of life and a new standard of conduct. Through them, a new dispensation appears and a new religion is inaugurated. Their advent is even as the springtime, when all earthly things don a new garment and find a new life. Abdu'l-Bahá, Some Answered Questions.
Thank you so much. That was great. So, according to Abdu'l-Bahá, the second category is the dependent prophets. As he explains, they are followers and promulgators. For their station, oh my goodness, there's quite an echo here. I'm not sure why that started just now.
Did you turn something on?
No. That's very weird. Oh, it stopped now. Okay. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Mark,
Oh.
if I can interrupt. I think it's because I'm upstairs, so maybe I won't read then. I'm in the same house as my husband.
I think that's it. Yes,
That's the
it is.
That
problem.
would be
So-
a problem.
I will stay muted.
Okay,
Sorry.
let's see if that changes anything.
Mhm.
I'm not hearing an echo. So that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Sorry. Let's
could-
go.
I could
Let's-
read for you.
That's fine. Okay, but we're not quite ready for that yet. But
Okay. Mhm.
let me start again here. According to Abdu'l-Bahá, the second category is the dependent prophets. As he explains, they are followers and promulgators, for their station is contingent rather than independent. Now, the word contingent means dependent on or conditioned by something else. The grace they receive comes from the independent prophets. They have no power or authority of their own, but derive theirs from the independent prophets. Abdu'l-Bahá compares them to the physical moon, because a dependent prophet is not luminous and radiant in and of itself, but receives its light from the sun. He places Solomon, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel in this category. So the writings of the Baha'i Faith typically include both the independent and the dependent prophets under the term the manifestations of God. This new label endorses the ancient belief that these unique individuals all reveal spiritual guidance for mankind. In addition, the phrase suggests that these teachers also perfectly model or manifest godliness in terms of human character and behavior, which is the very paradigm, they admonish us to emulate. That's from John Hatcher. In other words, the manifestations of God display the same names and attributes of God they encourage human beings to exhibit in their own lives. But how are they able to do this? The answer to this question requires an understanding of the Baha'i concept of God. According to Baha'u'llah, God has two fundamental aspects, or faces, if you like. God is he, she, it in his, her, or its essence. Okay, so God as the essence. And then secondly, God as visible through the manifestations of God. These faces may also be called the God, the manifest or hidden, and God the manifest or unveiled. As Baha'u'llah states in a number of his writings, God in his essence is completely inaccessible to humanity. He asserts that we would know nothing whatsoever about God if it wasn't for the messages brought by the messengers, prophets, Buddhas, avatars, and manifestations. In fact, that is the primary purpose of these outstanding people, to inform human beings of the existence, the characteristics, and the teachings of the unmanifest God, the essence of God, which is the God the rest of us are incapable of contacting directly. Well, Isabel, I think if you wouldn't mind, number 2 is all yours. Uh-oh, she
Are you
disappeared.
talking about, you mean Molly? Because I
Oh,
volunteered.
okay. No, here I am.
Okay, yes. Number 2, please.
Exalted, immeasurably exalted art thou, God, above the strivings of mortal man to unravel thy mystery, to describe thy glory, or even to hint at the nature of thine essence. For whatever such strivings may accomplish, they never can hope to transcend the limitations imposed upon thy creatures, inasmuch as these efforts are actuated by thy decree and are begotten by thine invention. Baha'u'llah, gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah.
Okay, thank you very much. So Baha'u'llah uses an alternate phrase to signify the utterly transcendent essence of God, and that is divine unity. And I see Leslie has her hand up to read number 3. Take it away, Leslie.
Regard thou the one true God as one who is apart from and immeasurably exalted above all created things. The whole universe reflecteth his glory, while he is himself independent of and transcendeth his creatures. This is the true meaning of divine unity. He who is the eternal truth is the one power who exerciseth undisputed sovereignty over the world of being, whose image is reflected in the mirror of the entire creation. All existence is dependent upon him, and from him is derived the source of the sustenance of all things. This is what is meant by divine unity. This is its fundamental principle. Baha'u'llah from the Gleanings.
Okay, so that's different than the unity of mankind that's the third oneness. This is the one that applies to God himself, the oneness of God. So once we have fixed the concept of this transcendent essence in our minds, Baha'u'llah adds an apparent exception to this divine unity, the manifestations of God. Baha'u'llah categorically declares that the essence of God and his, her, or its multiple manifestations constitute a single indivisible reality. Okay, I'm going to have to ask for some more volunteers. I'm ready with number 4 here.
The essence of belief in divine unity consisteth in regarding him who is the manifestation of God, and him who is the invisible, the inaccessible, the unknowable essence, as one and the same. By this is meant that whatever pertaineth to the former, the manifestation of God, all his acts and doings, whatever he ordaineth or forbiddeth, should be considered in all their aspects and under all circumstances and without any reservation as identical with the will of God Himself. This is the loftiest station to which a true believer in the unity of God can ever hope to attain. Blessed is the man that reacheth his station and is of them that are steadfast in their belief. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you very much. So, to summarize, the Baha'i concept of the oneness of God is actually comprised of two seemingly different elements or faces: the essence of God and the manifestations of God. So, this reading we just finished goes so far as to proclaim that all the acts and doings of the manifestations of God are identical with the will of God Himself. To my mind, this is another way of saying that the two stations of the manifestations, which Baha'u'llah explains in the Book of Certitude, the Kitab-i-Iqan, must both be included within the divine unity that Baha'u'llah is explaining. These are the stations of unity and distinction. So let's look at them one at a time. Here's Baha'u'llah's explanation of the station of unity of the manifestations. And Samin has beautifully put up her hand, so she's ready to read number 5. I'll have to scroll this as we're going. Okay.
The manifestations of God have each a twofold station. One is the station of pure abstraction and essential unity. In this respect, if thou callest them all by one name, and dost ascribe to them the same attribute, thou hast not erred from the truth, even as He hath revealed. No distinction do we make between any of His messengers. For they, one and all, summon the people of the earth to acknowledge the unity of God and herald unto them the khotar of the infinite grace and bounty. They are all invested with the robe of prophethood and honored with the mantle of glory. These countenances are the recipients of the divine command and the day springs of His revelation. This revelation is exalted above the veils of plurality and the exigencies of number. Thus, He saith, our cause is but one. Quran, I think 55:50. Inasmuch as the cause is one and the same, the exponents thereof also must needs be one and the same. Baha'u'llah Kitab-i-Iqan.
Thank you so much. So that Arabic word Kauthar, which is pronounced Kosar in Persian, means abundant good, and is the name of the shortest surah of the Quran, which is number 108. According to one of the hadith, which are accounts of the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, it is also one of the rivers of paradise promised to Muhammad by Allah. This passage is thus explaining the concept of the oneness of religion. Since all the manifestations of God perform the same role of acquainting humanity with the same cause of God, they are to be considered as a single entity. As is stated in the Quran, no distinction do we make between any of His messengers. The problem is that these messengers appeared at different times in history, to people in countless different locations. Their audience's needs must therefore have been different. Consequently, the messages, the manifestations of God delivered appear to be different, in spite of the fact that they were all speaking on behalf of a single God. So here is Baha'u'llah's description of the station of distinction shared by all the manifestations of God. And that's number 6. Who would like to read this one?
I can if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. The other is the station of distinction and pertaineth to the world of creation and to the limitations thereof. In this respect, each manifestation of God hath a distinct individuality, a definitely prescribed mission, a predestined revelation, and especially designated limitations. Each one of them is known by a different name, is characterized by a special attribute, fulfills a definite mission, and is entrusted with a particular revelation. Baha'u'llah Kitab Iran.
Ah, very nice. Thank you. So it isn't particularly difficult to see the unity of the manifestations of God as a feature of divine unity. It's rather more challenging, however, to see their stations of distinction as expressions of that same unity. As we know from the history of world religions, these numerous stations of distinction have been the primary source of conflict between the followers of the many revelations of divine unity over the millennia. Okay, so I need another reader for number 7.
It is because of this difference in their station and mission that the words and utterances flowing from these well springs of divine knowledge appear to diverge and differ. Otherwise, in the eyes of them that are initiated into the mysteries of divine wisdom, all their utterances are in reality but the expressions of one truth. As most of the people have failed to appreciate those stations to which we have referred, they therefore feel perplexed and dismayed at the varying utterances pronounced by manifestations that are essentially one and the same. Baha'u'llah Katabigan.
Okay, thank you. So in spite of these outward dissimilarities, Baha'u'llah assures us that all the acts of doing and doings of every manifestation, whatever he ordaineth or forbiddeth, should be considered in all their aspects and under all circumstances and without any reservation as identical with the will of God himself. I believe that this will be a revolutionary idea for many people. To illustrate how challenging it can be, I'd like to consider the case of Buddhism. And now we're going to talk about the oneness of religion. So there are actually 2 worldwide traditions of religion. The first is the Abrahamic tradition. And this includes Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Bahá'ísm, and the Bahá'í Faith. The Bahá'í Faith is generally understood to be the latest member of the Abrahamic or Judeo-Christian tradition of religions. Previous members of this tradition are Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Islam, and Babism. When Baha'is investigate the concept of the oneness of religion, it is relatively easy for them to identify commonalities among these religions. Some of these are a common source, God or ultimate reality, common deliverers, those are the prophets, manifestations, and messengers, common ethical goals, and common mystical experiences. Gaining a greater appreciation for the unity of Abrahamic religions is therefore a relatively simple task. The other tradition you might call the Dharmic tradition. Hinduism, Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. In the 21st century, however, humanity is now aware of a separate religious tradition that evolved in parallel with the Abrahamic tradition. Some scholars call it the Dharmic tradition. The word dharmic is an adjective based on the Sanskrit term dharma. This is a key concept with multiple meanings in the Indian religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, among others. Although no single word translation exists for Dharma in English or other European languages, the term is commonly understood as referring to behaviors that are in harmony with the order and custom that sustain life. It includes the sense of virtue and/or religious and moral duties. So a roughly equivalent term would be the Taoist word Tao, the way. The Dharmic tradition includes Hinduism, Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. With mankind's present-day planet-wide consciousness, we will need to expand our understanding of the Baha'i principle of the oneness of religion to include this lesser-known tradition, at least lesser known to those of us who grew up in the West. To explain or to examine some of the difficulties the Dharmic tradition poses to its inclusion in the Baha'i concept of the oneness of religion, I'm going to focus here on Buddhism. Why? Because as the Baha'i scholar of religion Roland Faber states, Buddhist language and spiritual intentions appear to be fundamentally different from that of Western and Abrahamic categories and inclinations. And he's got more to say on that topic, and that's our number 8. So who would like to read this one?
I can.
Okay.
They do not entertain the concept of God, but rather deny its very meaningfulness. They do not contemplate revelation, but offer methods of enlightenment. They do not aim at a divine world, but suggest the exhaustion of all worlds. They do not express themselves through messages of a prophet, but encourage the imitation of the experience of the awakened one. They do not claim immortality for the soul, but the selflessness of pure existence. Roland Faber, Divine Appearances, Trans-Religious Aspects of the Baha'i Discourse on the Manifestation of God.
Okay, thank you. So besides these differences, there is the fact that the Baha'i writings do not take Buddhism into account in any substantial way. Yes, it's true that both Abdu'l-Bahá and Shoghi Effendi acknowledge the station of the Buddha, the founder of the Buddhist religion, referring to him as an independent manifestation of God. And so here, in this next quotation, is Abdu'l-Bahá in Some Answered Questions. So we need another reader. And if you've already read, you can certainly read again. Gibby, okay. You're in New Brunswick.
Yes, I'm in Shediac, New Brunswick.
Shediac, okay.
Lobster capital of the world.
Fantastic.
Okay, our claim to fame. Number 10, did you say?
Number 9, actually.
Number 9, sorry. Okay. Question. To which category, independent or dependent, do Buddha and Confucius belong? Answer. Buddha also established a new religion. The founder of Buddhism was a precious being who established the oneness of God, but later his original precepts were gradually forgotten and displaced by primitive customs and rituals, until in the end it led to the worship of statues and images. Abdu'l-Bahá, Some Answered Questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Buddha was thus an independent prophet in the Baha'i view. Abdu'l-Bahá made the same point on several occasions during his extended stay in North America. The fact that Buddha established a new religion implies that when a person accepts Baha'u'llah's claim to be the most recent manifestation of God, he or she is also accepting Buddha as an earlier manifestation. Therefore, Baha'is must conclude that Gautama Buddha embodied divine unity through both his stations of unity and distinction, and expressed the will of God throughout his lifetime. Unfortunately, given the 25 centuries that have intervened since the Buddha's lifetime, he is said to have died in 450 BC, Abdu'l-Bahá advises us that we no longer have any authentic records of his life and teachings. In the same conversation with Miss Clifford Barney, Abdu'l-Bahá described the gradual decline of all religions over time. And that's number 10. Who would like to read this one?
I'll jump in there.
Excellent.
Okay. Reading 10. With the passage of time, their original precepts are altered. Their underlying truth entirely vanishes. Their spirit departs. Doctrinal innovations spring up, and they become a body without a soul. That is why they are renewed. Our meaning is that the followers of Buddha and Confucius now worship images and statues and have become entirely unaware of the oneness of God, believing instead in imaginary gods, as did the ancient Greeks. But such were not their original precepts. Indeed, their original precepts and conduct were entirely different. By Abdu'l-Bahá and some answered questions.
Okay, thank you. So, in other words, Abdu'l-Bahá is saying that the religion of Buddhism, as it is practiced today, has lost sight of Buddha's original teachings. That being said, he recognizes that what he calls the candle of Buddha is still shining. That's in this next reading, number 11.
I can read this one.
Thank you so much.
We have investigated reality and found that these holy souls, Abraham, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, were all sent of God. All of them have sacrificed life, endured ordeals and tribulations in order that they might educate us. How can such love be forgotten? The light of Christ is evident. The candle of Buddha is shining. The star of Moses is sparkling. The flame ignited by Zoroaster is still burning. How can we deny them? It is injustice. It is a denial of complete evidence. If we forsake imitations, all will become united and no differences will remain to separate us. Abdu'l-Bahá, The Promulgation of Universal Peace.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. So for his part, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi, wrote that the Buddha was a manifestation of God like Christ, but his followers do not possess his authentic writings. This will come as unwelcome news to Buddhists. Let's take a closer look at what the word authentic means in this case. Okay, somebody needs to read number 12 for me from Shoghi Effendi.
I can read it.
Thank you.
We cannot be sure of the authenticity, word for word, of any of the past holy scriptures, except the Quran, as they were either not written down during the Prophet's lifetime or have been changed in the course of time and the originals lost. Shoghi Effendi.
Okay, so that's the specific meaning of authentic that's being used here. The teachings of the Buddha may not be fully authentic in the way the writings of Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah are, but to just simply deny outright the historical and present-day reality of Buddhist teachings would be unjust. In his Book of Certitude, the Kitab-i-Iqan, Baha'u'llah states that it would be a gross injustice to God to say that the scriptures of a religion have been completely lost or irretrievably corrupted. And that is from in number 13. Now this is actually yes, this is Mujan Moment speaking, not Baha'u'llah. Okay. So who's going to read this one for us?
I read it. Can I read it?
Absolutely.
Okay. When the manifestation departs, only the scriptures are left to continue the teachings of guidance that the manifestation brought. God would not remove from the people the only source of guidance that they had left. Mojan Moment, the Baha'i approach to other religions, the example of Buddhism. In the Bahá'í Faith and the World Religion papers presented at the Algonquin College, page 169.
Okay. This is a very important point. God would not remove from the people the only source of guidance that they had left. To reiterate, God would not remove from the people the only source of guidance his messengers left them. Consider what Baha'u'llah has to say about the Gospels of Jesus. Now, this is a bit of a long one, so somebody with a lot of breath has to read this one.
Can you go up a little bit?
I certainly can. There we go. Number 14.
Oh, we have also heard a number of the foolish of the earth asserts that the genuine text of the heavenly gospel doth not exist amongst the Christians, that it hath ascended unto heaven. How grievously they have erred, how oblivious of the fact that such a statement imputeth the gravest injustice and tyranny to a gracious and loving providence. How would God, when once the day star of the beauty of Jesus had disappeared from the sight of his people and ascended unto the fourth heaven, cause his holy book, his most great testimony amongst his creatures, to disappear also? What would be left to that people to cling to from the settings of the day star of Jesus until the rise of the sun of the Mohammedan dispensation? What law would be their stay and guide? How could such people be made the victims of the avenging wrath of God, the omnipotent avenger? How could they be afflicted with the scourge of chastisement by the heavenly King? Above all, how could the flow of the grace of all bountiful be stayed? Baha'u'llah Kitab-i-Iqan. Yeah, that was too long.
Very important, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, in the case of Buddhism, then, the Baha'i view is that the exact words spoken by Buddha are no longer known for certain, due to the fact that they were transmitted orally for many generations before being written down. Some loss of accuracy is naturally to be expected. But that does not mean that they are to be completely disregarded. Here is Mujan Moment's understanding of their nature. All right, number 15 is a lot shorter.
Can I read it?
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, the scriptures of manifestations of God other than Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah are an accurate reflection of the message of the founders of these religions. They are a source of true guidance. They have retained their salvific efficiency,
efficacy.
sorry. Mojan Momen, the Baha'i approach to other religions, the example of Buddhism in Mojan Momen's the Baha'i Faith. Okay. Those words, sorry, I didn't know.
Well, that's entirely fine. So let's talk about what salvific means. It means having the intent or power to save or redeem. So that's their saving aspect. So given the thousands of pages of dialogues attributed to the Buddha, now available in many languages, such slightly qualified reverence is crucial to all future discussions with Buddhists. The fact that there are very few references made to Buddha in the Baha'i writings should not be taken as invalidating the status of Buddhism as an independent world religion. More accurately, it is evidence that there were few, if any, Buddhists among the audiences of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So this brings us to an important question. How are members of the Baha'i community counseled to relate to followers of the existing world religions? What is the overall goal of teaching the faith to non-Baha'is? Here is Shoghi Effendi's thought-provoking answer, number 16. I think every Baha'i should memorize this passage.
Okay, I'll read it.
Okay.
Far from aiming at the overthrow of the spiritual foundation of the world's religious systems, its avowed, its unalterable purpose is to widen their basis, to restate their fundamentals, to reconcile their aims, to reinvigorate their life, to demonstrate their oneness, to restore the pristine purity of their teaching, to coordinate their functions, and to assist in the realization of their highest aspirations. These divinely revealed religions, as a close observer has graphically expressed it, are doomed not to die, but to be reborn. Does not the child succumb in the youth, and the youth in the man? Yet neither child nor youth perishes. Von Shoghi Effendi, The World Order of Baha'u'llah.
So that's the statement that everybody who studies comparative religion ought to be having on their desk, staring at them every day. Shoghi Effendi is clearly not encouraging us to create a world in which the Baha'i faith replaces the existing world religions. He is not advocating the superiority of the faith over earlier religions. Neither are Baha'is told to erase the identity and existence of the previous faiths. No, the Baha'i goal is to reconcile the religions, to embrace their truths, to reinvigorate their life, and to assist in the realization of their highest aspirations. In modern philosophical language, it is to embrace their otherness. Let's cite an example. On October 12, 1912, Abdu'l-Bahá addressed 2,000 Jews at the Temple Emmanuel in San Francisco. He began by recounting the lives and accomplishments of Abraham and Moses in significant detail. Then he encouraged the congregation to investigate the two subsequent religions they had not accepted, Christianity and Islam. Finally, he asked what harm it would do for Jewish people to accept Christ and Muhammad. And here it is in the newest translation of it from Mahmoud's diary. That's our final reading. So who would like to be the last reader?
The Christians believe in Moses as a prophet of God. The Muslims are believers in Moses and praise him highly. Has any harm come to Christians and Muslims because they have admitted the validity of Moses? No. On the contrary, their acceptance of Moses and confirmation of the Torah prove that they have been fair-minded. Why should not the children of Israel praise now Christ and Muhammad? They will do away forever with enmity and hatred, which have lasted for 2,000 years, so that differences and animosities may pass away forever. Muhammad Diary, trans by Mohi Sobhani.
I should have put a period there. That's translated by.
Oh, translated, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So from this talk, it is clear that Abdu'l-Bahá's approach to teaching was to first determine his audience's level of understanding in order to secondly deepen and broaden their appreciation of religion using a systematic, logical exposition. In this particular encounter, in his role as the exemplar of the Bahá'í Faith, he gave Baha'is a potent example of how to interact with members of existing religions in accordance with the advice that Shoghi Effendi was later to articulate so eloquently as he did in reading 16. Our coming encounter with the religions of the Dharmic tradition will no doubt compel us to broaden our understanding of religion itself. We will be challenged to outgrow the limitations of our exclusive reliance on the Abrahamic tradition for religious insights. Our view of religion must become truly world-embracing. It is too easy to assume that the numerous differences between Buddhism and the Baha'i Faith are merely the result of the social side of their respective teachings being different. It will take significant study and deep reflection to realize that the discrepancies between Buddhist and Western religious language and intention reach deep into their respective spiritual identities. We must ask, therefore, what does the 2,500-year Buddhist investigation of inner reality have to teach us? And then, what does the Baha'i Faith have to offer the Buddhists that they do not yet know? Mutual respect and mutual self-interest will eventually lead us to a profound integration of the Abrahamic and Dharmic traditions. So for those of you who might be interested in beginning a study of Buddhism from an inclusive Baha'i perspective, I have created a brief bibliography, which I put in the chat. Okay, so I have some pictures of people who have done this work. This is Roland Faber. When he was preparing an erudite article on the Baha'i Faith and Buddhism, he discovered only a handful of studies of the intersections of these two religions. So the first one was by this fellow, Jamshid Fozdar. In his 1976 book, Buddha Maitreya Amitabha has appeared, he attempted to demonstrate in detail that Baha'u'llah is the expected fifth Buddha, the Buddha Maitreya. This next fellow is Ian Kluge, who is a Canadian, or was a Canadian. In two substantial articles published in Lights of Irfan, Volume 8 and 20, Canada's own recently deceased philosopher of religion, Ian Kluge, searched for evidences of similarities and differences between Buddhist and Baha'i concepts. The first was called Buddhism and the Baha'i Writings, an ontological rapprochement. The second was titled The Baha'i Writings and the Buddhist Doctrine of Emptiness, an initial survey. Both are very, very profound. And then we have Mujan Momen, who we mentioned twice. This is in his slender 1995 volume, Buddhism and the Baha'i Faith, the British Baha'i scholar Mujan Momen explained the main features of the Baha'i Faith to Theravada Buddhists. In his 2000 2003 article, The Baha'i Approach to Other Religions, the Example of Buddhism, he explored the principles of interpretation employed by Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá regarding the Bible and the Quran. And then he applied their principles to one of the religions not specifically addressed in the Baha'i writings, and that is Buddhism. Very useful piece of work. This fellow is Juan Ricardo Cole. In 1996, he produced a rare commentary that uses Buddhist conceptual frameworks to inform Baha'i readings of his own scriptural writings. It was called A Zen Gloss on Baha'u'llah's Commentary on He Who Knoweth Himself, Knoweth His Lord, and can be found on the Baha'i Library online. And finally, I think you may have had him as a speaker here. Harold Rosen, also, well, he's a dual citizen, he's Canadian. Strangely, Faber makes no mention of Harold Rosen's 2010 book, Founders of Faith, The Parallel Lives of God's Messengers. Rosen, in fact, devotes 2 chapters to the Buddha. Chapter 11 examines the background and mission of the Buddha, while chapter 12 concentrates on his teachings and legacy. Speaking of Harold, he identifies 25 patterns in the lives of the manifestations of God in his book, Founders of Faith, patterns in the backgrounds, missions, teachings, and legacies of the founders of faith. He then allocates 2 chapters to each of them, demonstrating how these patterns materialized in the lives and teachings of Moses, Zoroaster, Krishna, Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah. Now I've taken the liberty of including that as one of the 3 handouts that I've given you in the chat. It's called Patterns of the Founders of Faith. Okay, so now let's get to my conclusion, and I'm going to actually turn off sharing so I can see some people here. This has been but a small taste of the many issues involved in the upcoming dialogue between the Abrahamic and Dharmic traditions. I hope this preliminary discussion of the oneness of God and the oneness of the prophets has tweaked your interest. There is obviously much more to this story of unparalleled importance to all religions. For example, the prophets emerged from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as human beings handpicked by God to proclaim his message to their respective communities. They are reconceived in Baha'u'llah's writings as exceptional beings belonging to an ontological level superior to that of human beings. They summon human beings to God by infusing the world of creation with powerful divine energy, which purifies man's earthly nature and unfolds his spiritual potential. Baha'u'llah's conception of prophethood can be shown to be anything but antagonistic to that found in the Old and New Testaments and the Quran. He explains intricacies and abstruse passages of these precious scriptures in ways which glorify his predecessors' views. Those aspects of the Baha'i view which advance beyond the positions of its ancestors do not conflict, but rather supplement and bolster their principles. The time is fast approaching when human beings will need to deepen and broaden their understanding of the oneness of God as made visible through the manifestations of God. This will be achieved through in-depth studies of the lives and teachings of Buddha, Zoroaster, Krishna, Lao Tzu, and many others in the Dharmic tradition, as well as Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah in the Abrahamic tradition. All of these outstanding beings had one central purpose: to inform their audience of the existence, the characteristics, and the teachings of the creative force, known by a multitude of names, which ordinary human beings are incapable of contacting directly on their own. Okay, almost made it at 1 hour. There you go. Whew.
My goodness, Mark, you have given us just a wonderful buffet of things to think about. And I see a whole lot of hearts flying around here. And, that was just wonderful. I learned a great deal. And I actually learned how much I don't know in certain areas. Like I feel, and I'm hoping some people on this call can relate to this this idea of mine that I know what I know, but there's certain categories of my very own faith that I'm really not very well versed in, and this whole idea of the dharmic traditions. That's been interesting for me to hear you speak about, and just wonderful. So listen, why don't I open this up? Friends, what makes sense often is for you to raise your hand, and then our speaker can get to you. And then every now and then I will gather questions that have been sent to me directly, if you'd like to do it that way, or put them in the chat, which I'll keep an eye on. So we do have some time, and I know our speakers really love to hear questions and not only accolades.
Yeah.
We want to have a wonderful discussion here. Shala, you're first out of the gate, as I think you usually are, so good for you. And so everyone, please feel free to message me directly unless you're comfortable to just ask your question directly. So thank you very much, Mark. Wonderful. Over to you, Shala.
Thank you so much for this very well put together presentation, which sequentially get us to the new manifestations. I'm wondering if you see, coming from Iran, that the Abrahamic and Dharmic religions, as they have progressed, they have something else. They have culture in common. Descending from Abraham, you have Moses, Christ, Muhammad, and now Baba and Baha'u'llah. And also on the other side, you get, Buddha, Hindu religion, Buddha, Confucianist, and I would include Zoroaster. And I somehow feel that in Baha'u'llah, the two lines come together, concluding in the cycle of prophecy and creating the new cycle. I don't know if I make sense or not. I wonder what you think.
Oh, I have to agree with you. I think you're right on. And it's interesting when you look at the geography of the Middle East and where Iran is. It's really in between the two traditions. I mean, it's solidly in the Abrahamic. Zoroaster is usually considered to be part of that tradition, but it's right next door to India, right? Which has several of the dharmic traditions right there. So I wonder if that's a symbolic view of the religions coming together in one single location. I don't know. I have to think about that. That's a good point you've raised.
Also, I'm wondering, how do you see the First Nations religion coming together with the rest? Because, the writings do talk about it. Abdu'l-Bahá mentioned it. And I see so much similarity between the First Nations faith and belief and the writings we have of all faiths. So I'm wondering how, I have a feeling that also comes into it. Exactly how, mind you, I kind of put it together that in Iran we have 5 First Nations. And
oh, do you? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I'm wondering if all these First Nations are the foundations of everything else that we stand on.
I think they must be. And that would, I guess the term is Aboriginal, the traditions right around the world. I mean, in the Quran, for instance, and in Baha'is writings, it's made very clear that there have been messengers sent throughout history, way back before time was actually recorded that we have access to. The messengers were coming to those peoples. So we may have lost the names of the people in some of the cases as to who. But that quote that we read earlier about God never allowing some message that has been given to a people by their manifestation to be lost, I think that's probably what you're seeing when you talk to people of native background. There's a purity there that is quite intense, and they often respond quickly to hearing about Baha'u'llah. They recognize that this is the same source that they've been worshiping for all these years.
The last question is, on one of the readings, it indicates, Baha'u'llah says, Jesus and going to the fourth heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fourth heaven?
I have to say, I don't know enough about that topic. I know that in Islam, there's a hierarchy of heavens. And in fact, in the talk I gave last night about the ascension of Muhammad, when he took off on a horse up through the heavens, he goes through 7 of them.
Yes.
And he encounters
the
Jesus.
7.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the fourth is within that 7?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So Jesus was was the manifestation he met at that heaven. He met one at each of the 7 on his way to meet with God. So, but I have to say, I don't know a great deal about that set of beliefs. So I hope that's enough
Thank
to
you.
answer your question. Okay, Isabel.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit more of a observation. By the way, thank you. Fabulous talk. I'm really looking forward to reading the material that you sent. I used to practice Buddhism before I became a Baha'i.
Ah.
And I find that for me, when practicing Buddhism, the entirety of Buddhism is almost contained in the first hidden word. If you really sort of meditate on it. And I found that a lot of the practices in Buddhism are very similar to the Bahá'í Faith. The idea of meditation being the twin pillar, and also the illusory nature of this existence.
Mm-hmm.
And also the concept of the primal point of the manifest, of the unmanifest coming into the manifest, and that there is no actual duality when one contemplates the primal point. Because Buddhism also addresses these issues. And that's why I'm looking forward to reading the material that that you sent, because I haven't really found a conflict in, yes, there's practices, but I don't know, maybe it's because those essential qualities run through everything. And it's really interesting that the speaker before me, I think it's Shala, was mentioning indigenous traditions in North and South America. And I think that's also very problematic for people that are very much entrenched in a long-term tradition that goes over generations. It's sort of like all that acquired knowledge that also Baha'u'llah tells us to get rid of. So this is very Buddhist. But the thing is, there's more. And I think that's where I don't know how, because I also have difficulty approaching people that are Buddhist in discussing these things, because there's a jealous guardedness that people have for their various ancestral traditions.
Of course.
The identity is very, very embedded in there. And I even find, so for example, in the Catholic faith, this the signpost. It's not like you're worshiping the statue. The statue is a signpost to a deeper meaning. And it's the same in Buddhism. But the thing is that Baha'u'llah says to be careful about falling into those traps, worshiping the signpost rather than following the sign, because the sign is just a path where you are on the path. But anyways, I just really want to say I appreciate that, and what you think about what I'm saying about the first hidden word being very essential to all spiritual traditions.
I think you've got a level of insight into the Buddhist tradition that most of us don't share. But one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking, one of the things that seems to be an obstacle between the two religions is the notion of whether or not there is a self. Buddhism makes it very clear that there isn't, that there is no soul. Whereas in the Abrahamic traditions, there's a very strong connection to that concept. And yet, when you look at Baha'u'llah's seven valleys, what's the seventh valley all about? Giving up that notion. So I think there's common ground to be had at that level. Would you agree?
Well, I think when we start to worship the concept of anything, then we start to worship our own mind. And that's where the giving up part comes in. And even though, a lot of it is also language, right? Like people have, like even when Baha'u'llah describes the soul, it's not something that you can just peg. It's because there is that oneness there, which oneness almost speaks to dissolution of the identity that you hang on to, which is also embodied in the Buddhist tradition, but it's also in the Bahá'í Faith. If one has to just, you'll find it. Whenever I've had a question, was having a trouble with something, I would just think about it, and eventually I would pick up a piece of Baha'i writings, and the answer was there. It was very, and it's very difficult to describe. I don't want to get too much into a one-on-one conversation here because, I don't want to take up too much time, but sometimes I get very simple about things, and I think that's why what caused me to flip into the Baha'i faith was that very first hidden word. And there's a whole body of Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, that talks about this purity. My first counsel to you is this: possess a pure, kindly, radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. It's all embodied in there, and I just can't. When I saw that, it was just like an eye opener for me, and that's the only thing that I can really point to. Sorry, I don't mean to dominate the discussion or anything like that.
That was beautifully, really, really helpful. Thank you so much. Okay. Yasmin, you've been very patient. I've seen your hand there for hours, it seems. Okay, so what did you want to ask or say?
I understand that the dharmic manifestations were for sure before the Abrahamic ones. That's right?
Not necessarily.
No?
Sikhism is from the 15th century, 16th century in India, so it's much more recent. But I think some of the Abrahamic traditions, such as Zoroaster and Abraham himself, are before. Who am I thinking of? Before Buddhism. Hinduism is much older, but So they're interspersed.
So then that theory that came to my mind doesn't make sense, because I
What
thought
was the theory?
the theory was that if they are before that, it's just like a progressive revelation. So
Yeah.
they were growing, and
Mhm.
then as the growth continued, then the Abrahamian ones came, and then we got to Baha'u'llahs. Now we're getting to the time of adolescence and stuff like that. And then I was going to add that to it, that those First Nations and maybe the Africans, because they have something too.
Absolutely.
And they were whether before that or something, but it seems no. My theory,
Well,
it's not exactly that, the way that it went into my head.
not exactly. And I mean, unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, we don't have very precise dates. So it's very difficult to tell when exactly these faiths came to be. But I have a feeling they were all progressing at the same time. So it would be a much more complicated map than the one you're just trying to
I know mine
draw
is
here.
just as well. It's
But keep working at it. You'll get it.
God willing. Okay, thank you very much. I
Okay.
enjoyed it very much, although I
Thank you.
came a little
Jump
bit
in
late.
there with the
Thank
questions
you.
from the chat. I know Empire Mully are also waiting for a question, but
Yeah.
if you could please discuss Jainism a little bit.
Oh, I don't know much about Jainism, to tell you the truth. It's an antique religion, very old. Grew up in India. My sense is that it's much more materialistic, or at least it doesn't have as strong a component of the transcendent as some of the other religions. But it's more this worldly, but I could be wrong. As I say, I have not studied Jainism, so I have to say I'm not feeling too comfortable with pronouncing on that topic. So did you have another question there, Maureen, or shall I go to Empire?
That's all I've picked up so far. So
Okay, good. Wow. From the Congo, my goodness. How are you doing, sir?
I'm fine. I I have a question.
Oh,
I want to ask about the reading 16.
okay.
It said in my understanding I don't know how to make it really in practice, because when we are going in the teaching campaigns or in the teachings, we are calling people to become Baha'i.
Yeah.
And there it's saying that we should help them to realize the really meaning of their religion. And I don't know how to make it, because firstly we present the faith, and after we know, even after talking about the progressive revelation, we will ask them to join us in this new revelation.
Right.
Yeah, but
So how do people respond to you when you ask?
some usually some of the people are fanatic, and some will say, why do I need to abandon my religion and to join yours?
See, now that right there, I would say you're not really abandoning it, because the Baha'i Faith is embracing the truths that religion has brought to life, right? It is including those. Maybe not the very specific teachings, but the impulse behind it. So what religions do people have that you're teaching before they become Baha'is?
To that question, I don't know the answer.
Are they Christians, or are they believers in African religions, or
No, here usually they are Christian.
okay.
They are Christian, and people who born Christian, they are not like making effort every day to become you, because the answer that they give is, this is the religion of our. This is the religion of our ancestors, and we should not. And we should not abandon it. It is what so many people believe because they was growing up like that. It is like us who was born in the Bahá'í Faith, and we think it is the Bahá'í Faith, the truth. But the difference is for us, they taught us about unity of religion and progressive revelation. And for the Christians, they don't know about progressive revelation, revelation. The answer that they give in, the argument that they give in many times is, Jesus is the way and the truth. And is the Alpha and the Omega. Nobody can come after him.
Oh my goodness. We've heard that so many times, haven't we? Each religion holds on, clings to that belief about their own messenger, that he was the last one. But didn't Baha'u'llah say that God's hands were never going to be chained up, that he is free to do what he willeth, whenever he willeth? So I don't know. One of the things that I find saves me in a situation like that is to help people to understand that the first principle of Baha'i Faith is the individual investigation of the truth, that you don't join a religion because your parents were that religion, that you make your own mind up based on your own research, on your own deep feelings. That's a courageous thing to do, particularly in families that have a long tradition of a particular religion. But it's got to be done. People have to start thinking for themselves. They can't just keep recycling the old beliefs. I feel for you. It's a tough situation, but I think Abdu'l-Bahá is a great exemplar because he knew the Bible better than just about any Christian alive. And he could quote it to people. So I think that's one of the ways we have of teaching Christians. The more we know about that religion, plus our own, of course, we can articulate statements in that religion that led to that left the door open for another religion to come. So, for instance, take a look at the talk about the day of resurrection, for instance, the book of Revelations. So there are lots and lots of clues in that book about another religion coming that most people are blind to. But if you skillfully bring it to their attention, maybe they'll think about it for themselves. Anyway, I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox, but I feel for you because that can be a really tough sell. Shala, you have your hand up again.
Oh, I thought so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Molly. You had your
Yes.
hand up and it's gone. I missed it.
No, I don't.
Okay, what would you like to ask or say?
Okay. I studied under Vafakini back in the 50s, and she taught me something that has been stuck in my mind for a long time. I'm a Baha'i for 70 years.
Wow.
And she says, when a revelation has been sent down, revelations simultaneously when a revelation is sent down, then simultaneously revelations will go to simultaneous to the rest of the world. In other words,
Hmm.
there'll always be, when there's a revelation, then the revelations will be given to the rest of the world
At the same time?
at the same time.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the light that a manifestation brings doesn't just stay within that particular local community,
There'll be
that it spreads
manifestations.
across the world.
The manifestations will be simultaneously across the world. And also in the tablet of visitation, it says, "Be thou have been enforced, and God's hidden secret hath been divulged, and all created things have been called into being, and all the revelations have been sent down." So simultaneously, when there's a revelation, there'll be other revelations at the same time, simultaneously, with manifestations of God.
So who else was a manifestation at the time when Baha'u'llah was around?
Oh, probably a different parts of the country, imagine, the world.
I don't know of any. I don't know of any other manifestation who was alive during his lifetime,
They're different parts of the world,
except for the Bab, of course.
different revealers, different manifestations.
I would be willing to say that there were many people who acted as mirrors of the light that Baha'u'llah brought, whether they knew about the source or not.
Yeah,
and I think we're even seeing that today.
Different revelators, different message at the same time,
well,
according to the needs of the time for them.
Personally, I think this one was so spectacular that we only needed one.
I don't agree with that.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
I just wanted to do a little time check.
Yeah, we're
8:30, so I'd love to honor the hands that are raised. And in my experience, there's always someone else who gets a thought at the very, very end. So we'll keep our questions to the point. Thank you.
okay. Okay, so I haven't heard from Jaya yet. Maybe we should go to the people we haven't heard from first.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, all right, thanks. I'm from Malaysia. I just wanted to, in fact, I did add in the chat just now that in the list of bibliography that you mentioned about what you call comparative studies of Buddhism and Baha'i, you mentioned Jamshid Fosda.
Yes.
I think there's another book of his too, which really, I read it many decades ago. It's called The God of Buddha, where he actually tries to explain about what he call the idea, the concept of God that exists in Buddhism. That although the word God may not have been used, but the original cause or the cause of the causeless cause and terms like this, referring to the Creator. The other, I just wanted to mention that for those because it had an impact on me when I read those days. The other is, coming back to this earlier question that somebody else raised, this dharmic religion, while we know like Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, for that matter, other aspects like Ramayana, Rama, and so on in Hinduism, they raised a great civilization, and therefore we do acknowledge that really it goes back to the source of their teachings. But Sikhism is still something that I would still question, because it was more of a militant movement. It came subsequent to Islam and Christianity being in India. And so if we become inclusive in that context, then we will lump everything in it. And people will start questioning like Sai Baba and now Sadhguru and so on, who have millions of followers around the world. So then we become like an inclusive of everything, and so I think we do need to make a distinction between who are these greater manifestations and from people who are just trying to, revive and make attempts to bring about, unity between religions and so on. Because if we do not make those distinctions, then everyone, I mean, if we know, like in India, even what they call some of the emperors, you know, the Din-i-Ilahi was one, and a religion created by one of the emperors of to try to unite the people, but we cannot categorize them as being revealed divine revelation. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, so you're really feeling that Sikhism doesn't belong as one of the religions.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's worth investigating.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for raising that. That's great. Now Vanessa is waiting to say something.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting that you mentioned Buddhism. I first time went to a Buddhist temple on Sunday with a friend of mine, Lisa, and sitting there and listening to the discussion or the talk, I was seeing how similar it is to some of the beliefs and concepts of the Baha'i Faith. You know, like human beings being the higher being with the ability of intellect, which makes us stand out above all the other levels, and how important it is for us to love learning and the whole process. So I was amazed at how similar it was. But a question that I did have, because I am putting together some information on progressive revelation to give a fireside next month. And one of the things I was struggling with is that when I was looking at the dates, I did see that it had Krishna before the birth of Abraham. And again, 3000 BC, and Abraham was like 2000 in general terms, since no one really knows the exact date.
No.
And it did put it in it, and it did place it before the Abrahamic religions. So what insight can you give me on that?
Well, I have to say I'm not up to date on the dates for each of the manifestations, but scholars can have a huge range of dates for any one of them. Well, particularly the oldest ones. So I'm not sure that Krishna goes back 3,000 years. That seems a bit extreme. But I don't know. I mean, is that a source of pride for a religion to be older than another religion?
I think when we're talking about progressive revelation and you're looking at the time and era that each one of them came in a specific time in a specific place, that I think for those who are not Baha'is, that is something important that they, you know, like to know if it's progressive. So how does it progress through the centuries? If this one came at this time and another one came at another time. So that's what I was struggling with in this, looking at the dates.
Well, I'm just thinking that I can see how it would be important, for instance, for people in India to know whether or not Krishna came first or Buddha. Do we know for sure? Well, we have a pretty exact date for Buddha, maybe about 500 BC. But Krishna's not the knowledge we have about Krishna is a lot more fluid, seems to me. So I would be reluctant to try and pinpoint an exact date. But that's an area for people who are interested to really dive in and find out. There's lots of information about each of these manifestations you could spend years studying this. Or alternately, you could go to your friend Google and see what they have to say.
I went to like three different sites and three different places to try to cross reference, you know, and like you said, you can get bogged down. You can get bogged down in all these dates. Like, okay, what is the relevance to it? You know, after you go around and around in circle, you know. The other thing I did want to mention to Empire, because I run into the same situation here in the United States that he's running to in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we typically try to stick with the commonalities of all the religions. And like you said, if you know the Bible, you know that through the laws of Moses, just down to the laws of Jesus, they've been abrogated. You know, the Christians don't follow the exact laws of Moses, or else they'll be putting out eyes and cutting off hands.
Yeah.
So there's several instances throughout the religions that you can see and bring to their attention the differences and why the differences were there because of the customs and laws of the time. But the unity of it all is the cause of God. And we're looking for people to work with us for the cause of God, of unifying mankind, which is the only way towards peace. Now, I don't care what religion you are, all religions talk about peace, you know, and Baha'u'llah brought the way to bring about peace in this time and era by the unification of religions, of mankind, and the oneness of God. Now, if you want to work with us towards that cause, we really welcome you, and I think all religions pretty much do. But just understanding that there are differences in every religion, and knowing the differences, they can't help but agree that they don't follow the same thing as Moses followed. You know, Jesus Christ advocated the things that Moses said, and that's why they were so against him. You know, the more you look at the various religions, you see that things have changed over time, and that's the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, the social teachings are always different.
Right, and if you can point out those teachings and how they were changed through the religions, they can get that concept.
Yeah.
We're not asking you to change your religion, the fundamentals. We're just saying the concepts for our time change.
Okay, so Shala has got your hand up, and I think I saw Leslie's hand up, and maybe that should be
Maybe
the end.
Leslie should go ahead of me.
Okay, Leslie. What?
Thank you. I just had a comment about the timing of when these various messengers came.
Uh-huh.
Remember that the world has only recently been cross-fertilizing the way it is. So the arriving of different messengers in different parts of the world is, you know, God knows why and how and who he was trying to reach and et cetera. And I think that maybe the exact date is less important than the social political situation of those regions at the time. That's all.
Okay. Good point. All right, Shala, last one to you.
Yes, you mentioned Jainism. Jains, I'm fascinated by them. I spent my high school days in India going to Nira, and I found them very interesting and heartwarming because they believe in non-violence, and they believe that every living thing has a soul. And often they walk with a broom, and they broom in front of themselves so they would not step on any living thing. And they believe that the progress of the soul is, you know, they believe in reincarnation, but they are very peaceful, non-violent society. And that's true that they are very wealthy, but they are often use their money for good causes. So I was fascinated by them and found them very interesting. So as far as what Empire, my dear Empire, my grandson said, I always tell my friends who are Christians, you don't give up Christ. You see him in a different light. You recognize him again. You don't give up Moses. You don't give up Buddha. You don't give up any of those. They are your ancestors. It's like giving up your grandfather. You don't. So I think we recognize the fact that we stand on their shoulders if we recognize progressive revelation, that without them, Baha'u'llah could not have come.
Well, and that was one of the readings that we were discussing tonight, that Baha'u'llah has really polished our understanding of who these people really were. For the most part, in the early days, the understanding was that God sort of picked a person and said, you're going to be a prophet. But it's clear from the Baha'i writings that no, this guy was a prophet from before he was born. He has pre-existence as a prophet. So this was not something that was suddenly thrust on him. So there's a new level of understanding of the manifestations of God that we can use to, I mean, that's one of the things I like about Abdu'l-Bahá. He polishes up the understanding of who Jesus was and who Muhammad was. So these are, I think, very fruitful ways for us to interact with other people from different religions. See if we can deepen their understanding of their own tradition. Okay, Pina, you have a last question or comment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the question of the coming of Baha'u'llah has come to the age of understanding. That's very true, because in the Bible it says, I have many things to tell you, but ye cannot bear them now.
Right.
Howbeit till he, the Spirit of truth, will come. He
Yeah.
will guide you unto all truths. So the Spirit of truth has come and is guiding us, and Abdu'l-Bahá himself has written a book explaining about the Bible. So now we can understand it. To be able to understand it, we have to, like you go to the school, what is the current school standard at that time, at this time? We have to go under that educator, and that is Baha'u'llah and his teaching. Thank you.
Absolutely. That was great. Thank you. Oh, I see we're still getting more questions here. What do we do, Maureen?
Sarah or Farid, do you want to ask a question quickly?
Oh, yeah. One thing one idea I have is that, like, when we look at the different Baha'i scriptures or anything like that, it's not really, to me, it's not really referring to a mental construct. It's more of, what is the experience that we have in our lives, and ultimately it draws our attention to, and also kind of fosters, what is meaningful. And because when we have like a mental construct of anything, that's not really describing religion, because I can have an experience that's really inspiring and meaningful, but and that really is kind of to me, is the root of religion. And we can have a mental construct. We can talk about the soul, or we can talk about this or that, but the mental construct is not really the means by which we see religion or whatnot. It's ultimately the experience, and the mental construct is kind of more of the finite mind trying to put some kind of a model on this, transcendent aspect of reality, and something that really the mind doesn't really understand very much. I mean, I don't know. That's how I understand it. And like, so I don't know.
Well, Farid, I'm with you 100% on that. I think the concept I'm trying to get across in the course I'm doing at the moment, called Open Your Inner Eye, goes by the word gnosis. That's a direct experiential knowledge, which is higher than the intellectual kind of knowledge. That's what's being encouraged. We need to actually have experiences of the realities that Baha'u'llah is talking about, and of him himself, and of the Baha himself. So I'm feeling pretty much in agreement with what you're saying.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Well, friends, I'm going to speak probably on behalf of all of you when I say a very heartfelt thank you to Mark. You've been very generous with your time and your knowledge and insight. I think that if your goal tonight was to inspire us, to inform us, to intrigue us, to search out some of our own questions and search after new knowledge, then I would say that you've accomplished your goal. And in addition to that, you've managed to do that in such a lovely way that this was such a display of unity here, where we are really grasping with and entertaining these very profound concepts in such a loving way and emotive learning. So thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much for also sharing the documents. I think it's been a long time that you've been on the spot here, so I'll actually, I'm going to stop the recording here.
Okay.
And